Hi guys, welcome back to BBR Suspension. Today we are going to be stripping a set of YZ125 or YZ125 forks. There's a couple of issues with these forks. The fork at the bottom of the fork leg, the actual cast bracket where the fork guards screw into, there's a couple of threads that are stripped, so we're going to get those off and we're going to repair those threads. Then the second thing we're going to do, we're going to have a look, because on the YZ forks the free pistons have a tendency to crack or shatter actually. So what we're going to do, we're going to replace them with some aluminium free pistons. I get hold of these Zeta or Zeta ones, pretty decent quality. We'll replace those plastic ones with those. We'll put some fork bleeders in, replace the seals, we'll check out the bushings and if necessary replace the bushings, and then get the forks back together that they can go back on the bike. Should be good to go, so let's get started. Right guys, so to tackle these forks we're going to need a couple of specialized tools. We've got a fork cap wrench to loosen the fork caps. We've got an insert which goes into the top of the fork cap to loosen the base valve, the compression base valve. We then have a couple of other tools, that is to hold the damper rod when we're dismantling the forks. The syringe, the race tech syringe we use to do oil level in the base valve chamber or inner chamber. We'll do that when we reassemble. Then we're going to have a fork seal driver. We're going to need that to put the bushings and the fork seals back into the fork tubes. A couple of sockets, a couple of normal spanners and a couple of screwdrivers, and we should be good to go. Then when we take the fork seals out, I'll also make use of a plumber's torch just to heat the outer tube. It makes the fork seal and the bushings come out a little bit easier so that you don't damage them. Bushings in a lot of instances don't wear out that quickly, so they can be reused. We then obviously have some fork oil, some brake cleaner and a little bit of grease. So let's get started dismantling these forks. Right guys, so what I like to do is to start by just cracking everything loose. The base valve with a rebound adjuster, these things can be pretty damn tight, as you can see here. So here we go, let's get that cut loose. Then we're going to carry on at the top. We'll drop the fork down in the vise. So what we're going to do, we're just going to crack the air bleed screw, and there's a lot of pressure built up in the forks. So these screws we'll replace with little micro bleeders, so every time you come off the track you can basically let off that air. That air that builds up in the forks acts as a second spring, so you really don't want that. So what we need now is a 19mm socket. We use little race tech tool. It's a little insert which basically goes into the base valve cap, and we should be able to crack. There you go, that one turns fairly easily. We don't want it out completely yet, and then we'll crack the fork cap itself. Get that one loose. So what I'm going to do, we're going to basically do one fork on camera, the second one I'll strip off camera, and pretty much the same let's call it same procedure. Right, so what we do, we're going to loosen the fork cap itself. Takes a couple of turns to get these loose. Once we got the fork cap loose, you'll hear the threads click over one another like that. We then take the fork out and we can drop the tube. So this is where your base valve sits, where all your valving is and your shims. That's what controls your compression, and your compression damping is actually on this section of the base valve, and your rebound is on the mid valve. So what we'll do, we will drain all the oil out of the fork tube. It's just easier to do it now than to make a mess. So this oil's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse than this in the past. We get that oil out. A little bit of dirt coming out there in the oil. So that dirt is basically the coating on the bushes. I think it's a molybdenum coating which eventually wears, and it forms a very, very fine dust which goes into the oil. So what we do now, we just screw this back in 2 turns or so, just to hold it straight. Then what we'll do, we're going to clamp the stanchion part. Just give it a quick wipe. We'll clamp the stanchion in the vise. And what we'll do now is we'll loosen the rebound adjuster at the bottom. Right. So what we do, we'll compress the top tube slightly, and we put a little clamp to hold that collar. Once we've got the collar clamped, we need a 15mm wrench spanner. We'll get that 15mm on, and we'll basically get the rebound adjuster loosened from the damper rod. You can see that comes loose relatively easily. We get that screwed off, and we remove the damper adjuster rod. We'll clean all of this stuff off a little bit later off camera. What we then do is recompress the top to release our tool, and we can drop the fork slightly in the vise. Just makes life a little bit easier. We then loosen the top, and we can slide out our inner tube. So once that's out, again, we're going to strip this a little bit further shortly. We'll just pop that out the way for now. When you're doing work like this, you're going to need a lot of paper towel because you're going to get covered in oil. Unfortunately, one of those things. The good part is you'll never rust. Right, so what we do, we're going to compress the tube. You can see it compresses fairly easily. We'll get the top floating piston, which moves with the actual cartridge, the inner cartridge. That piston moves along with the inner cartridge. Get that out, and we can then tip the fork, and we can get our spring removed. And I'm going to leave the spring in there for now, and we can just clamp or hook this tube over there, let the last of the oil drain out. Then what we'll do, we'll clamp the inner tube in the vise. Okay, so we're going to use the raised thick insert and a 19mm socket, and we're going to wind the base valve loose from the inner tube. Okay, so once the base valve is loose, these can be a little bit tricky to get out, because what happens is you get a bit of a vacuum that forms inside the tube. So I push on the damper rod just to get it to lift, and then we can suck it out. Okay, so the good news is these free pistons on this motorcycle have previously been changed to aluminium. They're not the plastic ones. So that is the free piston that's been changed. It's not the plastic ones. Like I said earlier on, the plastic ones have a tendency to shatter. So we don't need to do that. That's good news. we'll get this cleaned up, but just a brief explanation. So what happens is that free piston forms a seal. This is your compression valve, and these are the compression shims. Okay, that is your check valve for when the fork is on a downstroke. You can see that check valve moves inside the piston. I'll just try and hook it with a fingernail. It's a very, very small movement, probably about 0.5 millimeter. So how the fork works, the damper rod pushes, there's a piston inside the inner tube. The damper rod pushes, and that piston then forces the oil through this piston and flexes these shims. The free piston, similar to a shock, when you're moving a solid through a volume of oil, the oil is incompressible. So the free piston itself needs to move up and down against the spring pressure. And the reason why you need that is if you don't have the oil under pressure, it's got a tendency to cavitate. The minute you get air bubbles into the oil, you're going to get air through the damper or the damping trim stack, and your damping characteristics go out the window. So that's how it basically works. So what we'll do, we'll flip this over and get this in the tray to be cleaned up. Then we can take the inner tube out, and what we'll do, we'll get the oil out of the inner tube. This oil normally isn't quite as bad as the outer tube, so we'll see what this set of forks looks like. And yeah, it's pretty manky. So you've got to pump the damper rod a couple of times just to get that oil out. For normal service on a fork, it's not necessary to remove the damper rod. The only time it's necessary to remove is if you're going to be working on the internal piston. We're not today, so we're going to just keep these as is. And when we reassemble, there's a little trick in setting up this collar, but I'll teach you that when we get back to setting it up. Right guys, so what I'll do, let me just pop this down. I'll get the second fork stripped off camera, and I'll get the components cleaned up. And then what we're going to have to do, I'll just explain quickly on this one. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to remove the casting from the actual chrome stanchion to be able to repair some of these threads that are damaged. It's easier to do it with the casting off the stanchion, because if you drill into the stanchion, you're going to have problems. You're going to have a leak, oil leak forever and a day. Okay guys, so what we're going to do now, we're going to get these fork seals. We're going to get the fork seals loose, so you're going to need a small screwdriver just to get the dust seal loose. Okay, so guys, you're going to need a screwdriver just to get these dust seals loose. Get the screwdriver under and turn them. Right guys, so underneath the dust seal, there's a retaining clip, which you can pick out with a screwdriver. It's a bit of an odd shaped clip. And what this clip does is it holds the oil seal in position in the shock body, or sorry, the fork tube, to get that seal, the dust seal and that ring out. And then we're going to get ready to get the oil seal and the bushings out. So for this, I'm going to change the position in the vise, and we're going to heat the outer tube a little bit with a blowtorch. What it'll do, it's aluminium, so it'll result in the aluminium expanding a little bit and releasing the grab on the seal and the bushings. And then we literally use the tube as a slide hammer to get the bushings and the seal out. I'll change that position quickly and then heat it up, and we'll get them removed now. Okay, right guys, what we're going to do, we're going to get a little bit of heat with a blowtorch onto the aluminium tube. So what we do, just light heat, keep turning it, and what this will do is it'll expand the aluminium a little bit and allow that seal and the bushings to come out with ease. What we'll do, we just keep heating it till the tube about 20 centimeters down from where we're working, starts to feel warm to the touch, then we know we're pretty much good to go. And what we do, we're going to just make sure that the suspension vise is nice and tight on the chrome stanchion, and we're going to use the fork tube, it's a slide hammer, to release the seal in the bushings. Let's just keep heating it a little bit, just to make them come out a little bit easier. You don't have to do this, but it can be difficult to get them loose, especially if the bike is a couple of years old. Right, just a warning, this can be messy because there can be a little bit of oil there, which is a tendency to splash. Like I said earlier, keep your paper towels handy. You might get a bit of an oil bath, but the good news is you'll never rust after it. Right, that should be good. Right, so what we do, we use this. There we go. Pretty easy once you applied a little bit of heat. We're not too worried because the seal itself we're going to replace. So we'll just let everything cool off. We'll get it cleaned up, and then we'll carry on with replacing the necessary parts and checking what we've got to do. Right guys, now that we've got the outer tube off, we're going to flip the chrome stanchion over. What we're basically going to do is get all the seals off, so make sure everything is above the clamp. Drop it down a little bit. You sometimes have to give this a few minutes to cool off. So on the top bushing, you can see there's a split in the bushing. If you have a closer look, there's a little split. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a screwdriver into that split and just turn it. That'll open up the bushing. That'll allow the bushing to come off. Still a touch hot, so I'll use some paper towel to grab it. You can see we'll get that top bushing off. These bushings are actually still in pretty good condition. There's no excessive wear, so they're good to be reused. We'll just clean them up. The second bushing is the one that actually sits tight into the fork tube, the top fork tube, the aluminium tube. So that's the reason why we heated it, to get this bushing out. Again, if I give it a wipe down, the bushing itself is in pretty good condition. Good to be reused, not necessary to replace it. Then you have a retaining washer. So this washer is basically used when you dismantle. This washer is what actually knocks, or the actual bushing knocks against the washer, and you use this washer to knock the bushing back into the tube when you reassemble it, so that you don't knock on the bushing itself. So we'll get that out. Then the first seal that comes off, this is the oil seal itself. So this is what keeps the oil inside the fork. These seals we're definitely going to replace, so I'm not too worried if they get damaged. The important part is when you replace these seals, you need to use a special tool which slides over the fork tube, because the recess where the top bushing sits, very sharp edges, they've got a tendency to cut the seals. You'll replace a seal and do all the work, and you'll have an oil leak almost immediately. So we'll replace the seals. I've got a seal set. That's your dust seal off. Then what we're going to do, we'll flip the tube again, so that we can heat up the actual casting and get that off. So one thing to note, on the side of the casting there's normally a very small grub screw which holds the casting on. This specific one, the grub screw has been drilled out, which tells me that these stanchions have probably been chromed or re-chromed before. That grub screw has been drilled out, and the thread's never been repaired for a new grub screw. So what we'll do is we'll repair that while we've got it off. On the other side leg, the grub screw is still in, so that one clearly came out easily enough. So these castings screw onto your stanchions, and it's quite important that you Loctite these on. So to get them off, we generally have to use a fair amount of heat, which will then basically soften the Loctite so that we can turn them off. It's important to make sure that they're clean. Just make sure that the tubes are clean and the doors, because you really need to grab them pretty tight. The Loctite can hold quite heavily, even though it's blue Loctite. It's a pretty big thread, so fair amount of surface area for the Loctite to grab on. And that's the reason why we use quite a bit of heat. Right, so we get I've got a 25mm bar of aluminium that I slide through. That's going to hold, and that's going to effectively be my power bar to get it loose. And what we'll do, we're going to fire up the trusty old blowtorch again and start heating the casting. Right, so we're going to heat this casting and try and get a little bit of heat uniformly into this. Work your way around with the blowtorch until you start seeing a little bit of smoke. There we go, the Loctite seal is broken. You can see at the top has come loose. So what we'll do, I'll just move the fork tube around in the vise just to get it loose. Instead of swinging and knocking everything over, I'll leave the blowtorch just going gently. That casting is pretty hot, so just be careful when you're doing this. Last thing you want is a visit to the hospital with a couple of burns. Kind of takes the fun out of doing the job. So you'll see as this casting comes off, should be a little bit of white residue. There you go, you can start to see that. That is the Loctite that's used to hold these in position. Still a little bit too tight to maneuver by hand. What we'll do, we'll also give the chrome stanchions a little bit of a polish while they're apart. Just polish out any high spots or imperfections. So these forks will be good to go, and we should be able to get that last bit loose now. Right, so like I said, there's your thread. You can see the Loctite. What we'll do, we'll also clean that up on a wire brush. Make sure that we get those threads clean when we reassemble it, and then we should be good to go. The other thing just to note, there's an aluminium insert in the bottom of the actual chrome tube, and you just want to be sure to replace that O-ring when you reassemble, because the heat might have embrittled it slightly. They're generally a standard size. It's a normal nitrile Shaw 70 O-ring, which you can get at most bearing suppliers. Right guys, I'm going to get this cleaned up off camera, and then what we'll do is we'll get to repairing the threads that have been damaged, and then we'll get to reassembling everything with new seals. I'll also get the other side fork stripped off camera, and I'll see you guys back soon at the bench. Right guys, let's get these castings repaired. So basically we're going to use a helicoil set, a recoil M6. That's what it looks like. You've got a special tap, and basically the coils, you get various length coils. So what we're going to do on this specific one, we're going to use what's called a 1 diameter, which the length of the coil is 1 times the diameter. So we're going to basically drill the damaged thread out to 6.3 millimeters, and then what we'll do is once we've drilled it out, we'll run the new tap through, and we'll basically, once we've got the tap through, we'll be able to then insert the helicoil, and the thread will be repaired. And how I've set it up in the mold, I've basically used just a small piece of 6mm threaded bar. You can see I screw it in to that thread. There's a lot of slop on the thread. It moves around too much, so that's why we need to repair that thread. It's a bit worn out. And on the other foot, from the other leg of the fork, there's 2 threads that need to be repaired, where the little bolts that hold the fork guards go into. Right, let's get going and repair these threads. What we do, I've got a little nib that I made, which is just used as a cap follower. We'll get the tap into a tapping handle, nip that up. Just drop this in the action more. Right. What we'll do, we will give it a little bit of
right, let's just see. That's better. Right. Right, so we run the tap through, feels free. That'll cut a new thread which suits the outside thread of the helicoil. It's neither metric nor imperial. It's pretty much a custom thread based on the profile that's used.
Right, now what we do, we use this little tool which comes as part of the kit. It's got a little tab in the base of the helicoil, and we use that to turn the helicoil into the new thread. So we get it positioned. Just see it's actually just in that thread. Right, so what we'll do, we'll get this thread or the insert started. Just feel it out. Might actually just quickly adjust this down. Right, so what we do, we'll just adjust this down slightly so that we've got the insert just on the tip. This tool. And what we can do, get the insert onto the tip of the tool, get it into position, and just lightly turning it, we should pick up that thread. There she goes now. Make sure that and just extend this a fraction so that we make sure that the helicoil is all the way in. You can see there's still a small piece protruding there. We don't want that sticking out. We want it all the way into the thread. Just feel it out. There we go. Then what we do, there's another little tool in the kit which we'll basically put through and give it a light tap, and that'll break the little tang that's used to turn it in. We'll break the tang off. We got our 6mm stud. You can see that's a nice tight fit. Right, so that one's done. We'll get the next one set up. And what we'll do is we'll just clean this up off camera, and then we'll repair the threads on the other one. We'll clean all that swarf from the tap and the drill out, make sure these are clean, and then we'll get cracking with reassembling the fork legs.
Right, so what I've done, I use a little bit of threaded bar into that damaged thread just to locate it in the mill. We'll then screw it loose. We'll flick over to our drill bit, make sure that's tight, and we'll drill that thread out, and we can then helicoil this. Give it a little bit of lube. Right, let's just see. I'm probably going to have to drop this knee a little bit. Right, again, a little bit of lube. And let's get the tap going through. Fortunately, this is aluminium, pretty soft, aluminum, as the American viewers would say. Right, we've got that thread sorted. Let's just get our tap follower out the way. Right, then we can grab, so the standard helicoils are 1.5 times, the length is 1.5 times the diameter. That is your ideal ratio. Unfortunately, we had to use the shorter one on the other leg because of the actual thickness. Clear some of the swarf. And just making sure that the top edge is not protruding. And then knock the little nib out. And we can just make sure our 6mm thread screws in. It's nice and tight. Right, so that's done. We can head back to the bench and start reassembling the forks. We'll see you back at the bench.
Alright guys, we're going to polish up the fork tubes in the lathe a little bit. What I basically do, I use a little bit of old Scotch-Brite. And what it'll do, it'll just clean up any high spots on the chrome. So where the actual feet were on the bottom of the fork, you can see there's a bit of water residue. Water gets in there and makes some grubby marks, so we're just going to polish that off. We also take off if there are any nicks or scrapes on the chrome, we take off those high spots so that they don't damage the new seal. And just by giving it a light scuffing, the oil basically slips in the marks and it'll help the new seals bed in. Right, so that gives it a nice clean surface for the new seals to bed in on. What we'll do is we'll quickly get the other leg, spin that up and give it a polish, and then we can start reassembling the forks. You can pause. We'll give the second leg a bit of a clean up. Chrome on these legs is actually in pretty good condition, so no need for re-chroming, and I didn't notice any specific chip marks or scratches. So those new seals should get in quite nicely and pretty quickly. That's basically all we need, just to give it a light clean up, and then you should be good to go. Perfect.